Think about someone sitting on a life raft. They're lost in the middle of the ocean, right? They don't necessarily know where they're headed. So, but somehow, they hear this little voice, or they see something in the distance, and they decide, you know what, instead of going true north today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust it by like 3 degrees off towards the east or towards west. I'm going to just adjust 3 degrees, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to commit to that for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. What's going to happen? They're not going to end up at the same destination that they would have ended up first and foremost, because they weren't achieving what they wanted to achieve. And that's sort of like the visualization that I have about pivoting or persevering in your own personal life, right? Hey everyone, welcome to the RLT podcast, where we share some real life tools, tips, and tricks to help you not only discover, but also reach your ultimate goals. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real Life Tips podcast. This is episode number 21, and we're so excited to be back here with you guys to share some more insightful content with you. I'm your host, Mono.
As usual, joined by Leon. Episode 21, what can I say? I mean, last week we actually had a little bit of a celebration for episode 20. We did a lot of research throughout the last couple of weeks, again, to bring you some insightful topics and hopefully a couple of things that you might have not thought about before. And tonight's going to be no different. I mean, we're going to pretty much build on the momentum that we've already put in place, and we're going to discuss another very good topic with you tonight. Martin, maybe just tell us a little bit, give us a bit of a hint.
Yeah, Leon, I mean, we came across some great content, some great research that we've done, but it's not really far removed from things that we've known already, right? It was just so profound hearing this message again and understanding that this really does apply to all aspects of life. And it's all around quitting is a skill. Now, I think that it's such an important point to know when to quit and when to persevere. And we spoke about this briefly, actually, in one business book that we went through quite a while back when we started our journey on researching and understanding businesses and entrepreneurship and all of that, where they spoke of pivot versus persevere. And it's so crucial in a business to understand when to pivot and when to persevere. When should you take the idea that you started the business out with and decide whether this is still worth pursuing, whether it's still gonna work the way that you pictured it to work in the beginning, or when should you not give up on that dream, but rather restructure that dream to see how you can adapt it towards what you've learned and sort of pivot slightly into the right direction and lean into the direction of the feedback that you've been receiving as well. And it's so applicable in real life as well. And so it's all about quitting. But the fact that quitting is a skill, knowing when to quit and knowing what to quit in your life at the right time, it's such an important point, because we've all heard this saying that in a lot of relationships or in a lot of situations in life, it does more harm than good when you hold on to things that are bad and you try and fix them, or situations. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it happens where you're trapped in a bad job and you feel that you can fix it, and you just end up just breaking yourself down, and wasting time and breaking yourself down to a point where mentally you can't cope with life anymore. So very, very excited to be deep diving into this discussion with you here tonight again, Leon.
Yeah, no, as usual, I think I find this topic so profound because I think this is one of those concepts that I grew up the opposite way. Like quitting is for losers and winners never quit. All the different stereotypes. Like we used to say the same thing about smoking after school, like winners never quit, right? And this is like throwing that entire concept on its head and being a lot more relatable to a lot of people and the way that life actually goes. And this is where you are presented with so many different decisions and choices in life, and you need to decide on whether to proceed or quit. And at the end of the day, quit is such, I don't know if you agree with me, but quitting has such a negative connotation to it. Even just the word makes you think of failure in some sense. It makes you think like you were somehow less good at that specific thing, hence you needed to quit that and actually try something else. So it really comes down to, and this is, I think, maybe hopefully some of the listeners haven't really heard it like this before. So I kind of want to say it again, that quitting is a skill. It's an actual skill. It's something that you need to develop. You don't just get born with skill. Skill comes from knowledge and aptitude and obviously, habit formation and stuff like that. So you actually need to learn yourself and teach yourself from a young age how to identify enough reason to let go of something, which is maybe a softer way to put it than saying that you want to quit it.
And it's so difficult though, because where do you strike the balance between, because we've all heard this, that consistency is key, right? In anything any sort of endeavor that you find yourself in. But where do you draw the line? And I think that's sort of where the penny just dropped for me when we came across this messaging in the way that it was delivered here. It's saying that where do you draw the line between being consistent and striving towards something and constantly pushing yourself down that road to achieve success, which is good and well. I mean, that like so much success has been achieved in the past where people have persevered. People have pushed through the difficult times. People have pushed through all of the tough times and all that to achieve what they wanted to achieve at the end of the day, right? But in some cases, you're right. I mean, you don't want to be labeled as a quitter. Nobody wants to be labeled as a quitter. So I think, it's absolutely profound looking at the point of, where does one draw the line between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way that we want to extrapolate on this tonight is going to actually shed a bit of light on how this is applicable and when probably the saying doesn't really hold up. But at the end of the day, it really has to do with decisions that you need to make in life and positions maybe that you are put in, or circumstance that you need to persevere through or get out of, and when to decide to quit. So it's actually in a more of a positive light, and I think the entire episode is going to be a little bit more positive towards when is a good time to quit and when do you know when quitting is actually a skill. Like, when is quitting going to benefit you rather than detract? And at the end of the day, there's actually so many different circumstances, and I'll maybe start with the first example. So when I started my first, and again, now we're gonna open up a little bit with our own lives and what we've gone through, and I think that still makes the show popular is the fact that we tend to kind of lay it out on the line on things that we've gone through with the hopeful intention that a lot of people listening to this have gone through the same. But when I started in my first professional career, and I mean, I was an ex-varsity student and I was graduate and everything. So I just assumed that I would land like the perfect job, right? Like I put in the 4 years to go and study something very intentionally, even though obviously, varsity was more fun than it was studies. But anyway, you end up with some sort of accreditation that warrants you a better job than someone that just got out of high school, right? So I went into my first position thinking that, I'll have that little bit of an edge, to get me a way better job than anyone that exited high school. And yes, I did maybe marginally better than some of the, competition just exiting high school. And I actually entered the job, and it was very layman kind of work, and I started progressing and I grew and I got into it, and I had a very good mentor and everything. And for the first 2 to 3 years, and I mean that's a long time, especially when you're young, everything was great. It was heaven on earth and it was amazing. And I'm thinking that there's probably a lot of you out there listening now that can relate. But then there's this point in time when I started realizing, and it's weird, it's circumstantial, and it's got to do with your 5 influential people. Again, we spoke about that in previous episode. And you start realizing that I could probably be doing better, right? If I start gauging myself and my skills and what I think I'm worth. Like when I go to bed and I look at my skill set and what the job actually restrains me to do and how much further I can probably do than what the job is asking from me, I know that I'm probably worth more. And that is a perfect example of quitting as a skill. It's when you've identified the Achilles heels, and I'm not going to go down the route of what that means, but basically the crippling effect of remaining in a circumstance where it's not serving you, it's not building you up, it's not progressing you further, it's not actually going to grow you up as a person. Either it could, and again, there's many dimensions. This could either be spiritually, physically, professionally. It doesn't really matter. The kind of concept stays the same. But you get to this point, and I got to the point when I realized that, I love this place. I love the people. We feel like family. Some of us have barbecues over weekend. I know everyone's children's and when their birthdays are, and we bought each other presents. You really get so caught up in the, let's call it white noise and all the different connections with all the people that you stop to think about, I'm here for a career. And again, this is just one example of the concept, but I'm here for a career. I'm here to further myself professionally. I'm here for, at the end of the day, I'm here for a paycheck. I mean, let's just put it as it is. Yes, I can make friends along the way. Yes, it's an option. It's absolutely an option to meet the perfect people. Some people meet their soulmate at work. That's not the point here. The point here is that your professional career, the whole intention is to try and grow, right? Whether that's going to be to develop some sort of skill that's going to lean towards philanthropy, or whether it's going to lead towards building your own business, or whether it's going to stay on a career ladder climb towards directorship of a big corporation, whatever that might be. But if you don't quit when you feel that you have reached your limit, right? Like you've reached your roof within that particular organization or place or point in life, you will literally remain there. And I don't want to go back to episodes where we talked about, comfort zones and those things. I think everyone kind of knows what I'm referring to. But it's really about then using the skill of understanding and looking at the variables in your life and where you want to be and seeing that those are completely misaligned. If you paint the picture 5 years down the line and where you are now and how you see things going is not going to get you to that 5-year point, you need to quit. And with quit, we don't mean cold turkey. There needs to be a process. There needs to be a thought pattern. There needs to be research and, all the due diligence into soul searching and finding out exactly what it is that you're actually yearning for and what the next step might be. But at the end of the day, you are very clear and intentional that you need to quit. This is the end of the line. You're not going to grow any further. You've done what you need to do, and it's time to move on. Now, that's just one example of skillful quitting. Manu, maybe, I don't know, do you have anything?
No, I love that, Leon, because you know what? You're touching on something there that I absolutely resonate with. And if I had to picture it back in, and I've gone through multiple sort of career changes and, jumping ship in certain organizations, sort of sticking to the same industry the whole time. But the main reason for looking, for the greener fields on the other side of the fence is usually because you see that there's an obvious faster route that's in sight. And you can see that by sticking it out in one organization, you won't necessarily achieve those goals. Now, absolutely, yes, in a career aspect and a professional aspect, you can apply this sort of methodology or thought process. But I feel that there's so much more to it, Leon, that really intrigued me. It's if you think about pivoting or persevering, not necessarily just in career, but also looking in your personal life. And we've touched on relationships in our chemistry compatibility episode, which I feel covers all of the grounds that we want to cover. But absolutely, if you're stuck in a toxic situation, whether it is in the workplace, whether it is in a relationship, or whether it is in the friend group that you're stuck in, right? Then you have to get to that point where you need to understand where do you draw the line? Where do you stop? Or where do you get out? If it's not working, if it's not driving you towards your goals or towards what you want to achieve in life, you need to call it quits. So it's such a powerful thing that you can apply to each and every aspect, not just to the career that you're currently sitting in. Absolutely, yes, that has helped me so many times. I can't even explain to you, Leon, that if you feel that you've hit the ceiling at an organization, and they always say, don't quit because it's hard, quit because it sucks. And that also stuck out to me.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm quitting because it's really, really hard. I don't want to do the work. Most of the time, when I find myself in this pivot or persevere T-junction in my life, or crossroads, if you want to call it that, then it's usually I have to ask myself the simple question, am I quitting because it's hard? Because I know that I'll have to put in the work, but I know that whatever sits beyond that work that I'm going to have to push through is going to be reward enough? Or am I quitting because I just absolutely hate where I am at the moment? And that can be interpreted in a professional career sort of scenario as well as in your personal life. So I just found that to be the most powerful of the entire saying, is that your quitting is a skill.
100%. Look, I mean, that is extremely, extremely accurate. And I think you painted the picture quite perfectly now for anyone that needs to understand the difference. There's another aspect here that I just need to distinguish before we continue with, the subject. I read a book. It's actually one of the very first books I read when I came into a management position a couple of years back. The book's name was Grit. It was by Angela Lee Duckworth. I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners have read the book as well. And it has to do, obviously grit, so it has to do with the grind, the daily grind to get something done or to achieve a goal. And that can get really, really tough. And you just mentioned it so eloquently that it's not about if something is hard, you need to quit. That's not what we're talking about here at all. If something is hard, usually the most reward lies at the end of that tunnel. That's not what we're talking about. So we're not saying quit because something is hard. We are saying quit because something doesn't make sense or is not going to serve. Now, quitting, that's why we are also saying that quitting is a skill and not we. I mean, if you Google the concept, a lot of us tend to agree. And it's because you are able to say that, look, if I look at the different variables, how's this going to serve me? Being able to look a little bit more long term. What are the benefits going to be? What are the chances of success? If you can bring all the variables and all the different things going on together and measure towards this probably being unsuccessful, then quitting is a skill. It means that you were able to call it quits way before you've either maybe in business or in maybe, let's call it supply, or not supply chain, maybe in development. If you're an R&D and you know that something is very, very unlikely to succeed, and you are able to pinpoint the various factors and the variables of why, and you pull the plug, it means that you can immediately start working on either a better prototype or a better idea, a better solution to the same problem or a different problem. It all depends what comes into the R&D stream. But at the end of the day, if you spend 2 years worth of resources, a huge team, just to provide an unsuccessful product, that means that you didn't quit soon enough. You did not see the long-term effect of bad decision making, or perhaps writing on walls, when you have that hinkering of this is just gonna go wrong for various different aspects and various different reasons that you can either quantify or qualify. if you don't have the ability to call that out, you're going to stick with it. You're going to be hard-headed. People are going to tell you that it's going to fail. You're not going to listen to them. You're going to persevere, and you're going to feel like a champ just to fail. And that is where we're saying quitting is a skill. That's why it's probably the most important skill among maybe learning how to speak and breathe that one can ever learn, is to understand with your talents and your acumen and everything that you know and everything that you are, to apply that towards goals in life that's achievable, that's going to either improve life, or that's either going to bring something better in life, or that's either going to make the company that you work for more successful, or bring a new product to the customers that's going to make them really happy. Another way we can look at this, and I mean, we're very, obviously as a podcast, we're very business oriented, but you can look at this from a completely different view, from a more personal view. And you can look at this from like a kid's point of view, right? When you're a child and you start learning about life and how life works and the necessity to be obedient, and you've got parents, and later on you've got a school system that tells you what to do, and you need to have discipline and order, and that's going to help you gain skill and all this stuff. You're going to start getting presented with ideas on how to improve yourself, right? Now, let's say, for example, you're a 5-year-old and you enter into a swimming school, all right? And again, I'm talking on behalf of 5-year-olds here. So if there's any 5-year-olds listening, this is what I think is going through their heads, right? And you have a really difficult instructor, and he's just like pushing you in the deep end and telling you you have to do this, and this is how you learn how to swim, and you won't swim unless you've drowned once. If that's the kind of attitude, and you quit because of that, and you explain that to the next person, let's say your parents, they might actually think and empathize and say, wow, okay, there's a little bit of reasoning behind this. I understand the concern here. And guess what? They might actually go and speak to that instructor and say that, listen, there's a bit of a problem here. You are instilling fear, and through fear hoping that people just inadvertently start swimming because that's the only other option from suffocating underwater. You might actually be able to develop change and get that entire little swimming school to have a less aggressive swimming program. So there's a lot of reasons why you need to almost like adapt the skill of quitting, or at least start thinking about the process of how to quit and the reasons for quitting at a young age, so that you can develop it as a skill at an older age, where it really serves for obviously a lot more impactful things than learning how to swim. It can really become the measurement between whether a company can make it or break it. I mean, or whether a relationship can make it or break it. And I mean, I just spoke about kids. I mean, you can take this to relationships, and I think you're the relationship expert between the two of us. But I mean, yeah, does it make sense? I mean, I think it really applies to every single part of life, and more so, obviously, makes a lot more sense. And I think let's say the trade-offs and the payoffs are way bigger the older you get on how good you are at selectively quitting certain things.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think you mentioned something there that I just want to understand a little bit better. And I think I do understand the way that you're putting it, Leon, and it's so interesting because if you think about business, and what you're talking about is, like when you mentioned the developers and going through that cycle. I'm not a developer at all, but I can obviously imagine. So just think about Zuckerberg, when he went through the whole Facebook, designing of Facebook and all of that kind of stuff. It absolutely makes sense from a business point of view, or from a technology point of view, to say, I'm going to start by building an app, or I'm going to start by building a platform, or I'm going to start by building a business. It doesn't have to be an app or development or anything, right? But the point is, if you start building that and you don't constantly check in with the people using those platforms, if the feedback that you're getting from them is actually positive and what's negative, what's working, what isn't working, then you basically go off of your own assumptions. And it's one of the most profound things that I read in a business book is making sure that you test your own assumptions. Now, why am I telling you this specific story in that specific line, and why did that actually stand out to me, Leon, is primarily because if you think about life as well, 100%, we basically figure life out as we go. Let's be honest, you get some guidelines, right? You get guidelines from your parents, you get guidelines from the people that you socialize with, you get guidelines nowadays from social media. I mean, we've spoken about that as well. But the point is that we basically are all just here and figuring life out. So, and you're doing a lot of that based on the assumptions that you build up in your head. So every now and then, by stopping and looking back and saying, let's check in with myself to see that what I'm doing is still aligned with what I want to be doing with my life or what I want to accomplish with my life. And it's really, only in a business point of view, it's saying that if your users are complaining about, maybe to you, the most important thing was to have a video on your intro screen when they log into your website. And you thought that nobody's ever going to use that website because, everybody's into video now and YouTube exists and there's videos everywhere and all that. For you in your head, you build that up or in your mind, you build that up as this is the most important feature for my platform, only to find out that when you launch, people don't really care about that. The main thing that they were complaining about, the main thing that they were stressed out about was the fact that there was, it requires you to input your age or it requires you to input your birth date. And that was their main concern. So looking at that and saying that my business is a failure because, people don't like my platform and it's mainly because I couldn't incorporate the video into it or whatever, you have to look at the feedback. You have to check in from a business point of view to see what is working, what is not working. And absolutely that makes sense in life as well. So that to say, let's persevere with my idea of trying to push the video down upon people because I've gotten the feedback and most people want the video, but I've confirmed that hypothesis. Or in my own personal life, absolutely. This is what I'm doing right now. If I check in with myself and I say, the relationship that I am in, is it taking me towards the goal? Have we had that chat? Do we want to get married? Do we want to stay in this country? Maybe there's so many relationships, and I don't want to touch on relationships too much, but there's so many relationships where you find the person doesn't even want to stay in the country. Maybe they think about immigrating and they want to go travel the world, and it's not aligned with the goals that you have set out for yourself because you want to stay in the country, you want to develop your career, and that's sort of like your comfort zone. That's where you want to stay at as well. But in life in general as well, if you think about it, it's so important to take that same principle and step back and ask yourself, based on the feedback, and the feedback being, obviously, you're not going to wait and ask other people, hey, so how am I doing in life? And then base all of your assumptions and future plans off of that. But the feedback that I'm talking about could be, things like, what sort of results am I seeing? If I come home at night, am I happy? Am I actually content when I get into bed at night? Am I happy with the job that I'm in? Am I happy with the environment that I've been placed in? Am I happy with the people in my life? And it really comes down to taking stock of the current situation that you're sitting in and deciding for yourself, is this worth pushing through? And swallowing your pride and understanding that there is a right form of quitting and there's a wrong form of quitting. So it's very, very interesting when you put it like that, Leon.
Yeah, no, I think that's important to note as well, is that, and I want to kind of come back to what we started off with. I think the word quit has such a lot of negativity going for it that it's almost like we need to find another word, like, I don't know, willfully exiting or something like that.
I love that. Yeah.
And
because that's the best way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because if you quit something, it means that, or in most people's mind, when you quit, it means that you couldn't win, right? You couldn't find a way to bring the end result, so you quit. And I think that's actually the least amount of quitting you'll ever do, is when something didn't go right, you just leave it. I think that's the least amount of time you'll ever then quit something. I think the most times in your life that where quitting would be applicable is through decision making and deciding whether something is good or bad, whether something's going to serve or detract, etc. And
is it going to do more harm than good? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Is it going to do more harm than good? Is it going to help with your 5-year plan? Is the relationship going the way that it should? Is your spiritual life going the way that it should? Again, this literally applies to everything that you do. Now, one of the things that I firmly believe in, and I think most people do, obviously the only thing in life that's finite is time, right? There's only so much time in life. Now, going down the wrong path, willfully so, knowingly so, without quitting, means that you are literally wasting away on the candle that is life. And it means that you are literally going to have less exposure to more chances and more things in life if you just keep going down pointless avenues. I think this is probably where it will sink in for most people, is that the more time you spent going through things that you already skillfully thought about, you draw the conclusions, you did your analyses, and you know that this is going to go nowhere, whatever it might be, and you just stay in that circumstance, you're literally killing off time willfully. You are literally deciding if you can go and take your life and put it on a timeline, and you can go and draw your 5th birthday and the date that you graduated, the date you got married, and you draw that over a timeline, and you start taking away from that timeline and you make it that literal, that's when you'll realize why it's important to quit.
That's powerful, Leon. You know why? Because when you're talking about that, it reminds me of, and I'll shamelessly admit this. I mean, I started a business and it failed, and I quit, and that's why it failed. The main reason for that is because I willfully exited that entire situation. So you have to understand that quitting at the right times is very, very important. And when you're talking about resources, you're striking gold, Leon, because if I were to go on with that business and it was gaining traction, everything was going right, there was a lot of effort, a lot of late nights, a lot of hours that I spent actually trying to build that from the ground up, and I was really, really proud of what I've accomplished by myself, building the idea and getting it all out there. But there comes a point in your life where you have to decide, and like you said, it's all about resources. You have a finite amount of resources at your disposal on a daily basis, and you get to that point in life where you have to decide, is my time best spent working on something that I can see is not necessarily going to bring me closer to my goal in the amount of time or in the situation or circumstances that I've just been thrown into as well. So, and life changes and things happen and circumstances change. So in times like that, I mean, I got to a point where I just didn't have enough resources. I couldn't spend the additional funding. I couldn't find the additional time in my day to put it back in there because I had a very, very demanding job all of a sudden. And I had to go
those are the hardest ones, right? Those are the hardest ones. I mean,
it's the hardest ones to let go of because you've put in so much blood, sweat, and tears.
And yeah, I mean, we're talking again here holistically about the power of quitting, and again, when quitting is a skill. But the example you just painted, I think a lot of people has been in those, or a lot of people have been in those circumstances where you've literally had this. I don't want to call it, it's almost like a passion project. Like you put your heart and soul into it, right? And when you're so intimately close to an idea or a concept, it's very, very difficult to let go. It's extremely, like, it's destroyed so many people on just keeping with something and staying with something. And what you need at that time, and maybe, before we start going into the end of this episode, Sometimes what you might also need is a little bit of perspective, right? If you're very, very close to the situation, usually you're drowning in the detail. Like you can't really see the end, the start, the beginning, and anything like that. That's whether it's career-wise, personal, doing entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. If you're very close to the problem, it's very, very hard to let go, first of all, because you've already invested so much, and to also see beginning and end. Now, I mentioned in one of our episodes, I forget which, if you have close friends, family, whatever, that you regularly converse with, and they know what you're busy with and stuff like that, they are usually very, very good at evaluating peaks and valleys, right? So they're always good at seeing when you were very happy and when you were sad. When did you talk positively? When did you talk negatively about whatever you are busy with that you need to quit or continue with within the context of this episode? And they can usually give quite an accurate, very quick, straight answer about you should leave this or you should continue. I know that it sounds abstract, and I know that they don't know the detail. They don't know the detail, and I know the beauty's in the detail, but remember the devil is also in the detail. So you need to allow people to give you a little bit of a third. If you think about physics, we can only see three-dimensional, right? You can draw down a square. You can see first dimension, second, and third. You can't even fathom fourth dimension. But if you bring someone into the equation that's literally a bystander or an outsider that just is close to you, they know the story, they know what you're busy with and struggling with, and you ask for their perspective so that you can get perspective, that's maybe a good way to at least hear them out and gauge their criteria upon which they measure the reason for quitting, and taking that information and really seeing that as valuable input to your decision as well. The reason I say this, I've now read a lot in my life and I've done a lot of research, and there's a lot of people that died there's a lot of graveyards out there with dreams that died along with people that never got realized. There's a lot of dreams in graveyards, and it's because people never let go and they couldn't figure out, they got so engulfed and almost like drowned into the idealistic or the perfect vision of what they were trying to go for, that they completely missed the evidence and the blatant obvious facts that were staring them in the face of failure, or maybe just pivoting and maybe just making some critical adjustments that can then lean towards success. So it's sometimes it's just the point that I wanted to raise, that if you are struggling to get perspective and you're too close to the problem or the idea or the job or the relationship, and you have the emotional intelligence to realize that you are too close, and you go and venture towards finding some advice from your nearest people, nearest friends, nearest family, whatever it might be, not Google, obviously, that might help you a little bit to just grow some perspective, get a different view, get that fourth dimension.
That makes a lot of sense, Leon, because when you think about it, people think emotionally first and then they think logically. We've seen this over and over again with and I'm guilty because I'm human. So
we all are. We all.
Yeah, exactly. We all buy things we don't need.
About this.
We all buy things we don't need because people advertise it in such a way that they trigger your emotions. Yeah. It's the way that we are wired. We can't get away from it.
That's how Apple keeps making money, emotional purchase.
Oh, of course. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why I now own Apple products, because
they ask an obscene amount of money for what
you basically sold it onto me as well.
But yeah, it's you buy.
They sell you that,
dream, right?
Yeah, they sell you the emotion, right? So, and that's the problem as well with a lot of these situations in life. When you can't find perspective, it's good. It's good to look outward. It's good to ask other people's opinions or get their perspective on it, because they take the emotion out of it. They're not sitting
Yes.
in the stress. They're
That's
not
the
sitting
thing.
in the toxic environment that you're sitting in at work. They have a different perspective because they take the emotion out of it. They think logically about it. So it is absolutely a good idea, I think, in scenarios like that. Yeah.
And even if you speak to them, so even if they're not privy to all the information and you maybe phone them up for the first time, and again, and I'm staying on this topic a little bit, just to put it into perspective a little bit more, maybe from a practical perspective, for those of you out there listening that is now in that specific position, even if you phone up like a really dear friend or a very good family member that's always been good at advice, and you start explaining to them what you're finding yourself in, or again, whether it's relationship, whether it's career-wise, whether it's spiritual, whatever it might be, or physical, and you explain to them, you tend to kind of highlight, again, I'm talking about peaks and valleys, so I'm talking about ups and downs, and the nice things and the bad things about your situation, the pros and cons. They are usually very equipped with that small information to make a slightly better decision than you are caught up in all the detail. I just quickly wanted to
I love that.
as well.
I absolutely love that, Leon. You know what? I think it is. It's such an important point for us to discuss this, Leon. It's something that I really, and this is what I love about our discussions. It's funny because we do a lot of these type of discussions offline. Of course, we started the podcast primarily because we typically have these discussions. We have these little digest discussions where we come across content. We want to get to the bottom of it. We want to digest it because it's difficult. A lot of the content, you have to listen to it. You have to constantly reevaluate, go and research, go deep dive, make it applicable to your own life and all of that. So it's really great for me to chat through a lot of this stuff to easily digest it for myself. And I think that's one of the main reasons we started this podcast, is also to, might as well share it with the world whilst we're busy digesting it. And it's so great hearing your perspective on that. One of the things that I wanted to add to that as well, that I feel is extremely, extremely important, is when you think about readjusting or pivoting, in even the tiniest minute ways in your life. Think about someone sitting on a life raft. They're lost in the middle of the ocean, right? They don't necessarily know where they're headed. So, but somehow, they hear this little voice, or they see something in the distance, and they decide, what, instead of going true north today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust it by like 3 degrees off towards the east or towards west. I'm going to just adjust 3 degrees, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to commit to that for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. What's going to happen? They're not going to end up at the same destination that they would have ended up first and foremost, because they weren't achieving what they wanted to achieve. And that's sort of like the visualization that I have about pivoting or persevering in your own personal life, right? It's basically saying that even not big ways. It's not saying just, think about this. Should you go and quit your job? Should you move to another organization? Should you dump your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or husband and find a new partner because it's not working out for you? I'm talking about the little things in life as well. And this is where it really just hit home for me, is thinking about what are the little things that I can change in my life? Where should I pivot? Where should I persevere? What's working out for me? What's not working out for me? But really constantly being aware of it and taking stock of it and saying, I'm unhappy in this area of my life. Why am I unhappy? Is it because I need to push through the next level, or push through the next ceiling? And what do I need to push through it? Is it going to be worth pushing through it? Is it going to be worth the effort? If it's not, should I maybe just adjust 2 or 3 degrees to the left? And, maybe I should try something else, something that's going to work for me, something that's going to be a little bit more fulfilling for me. And it's not always overthinking it. It's always good having a 10-year plan, a 5-year. I wouldn't even say having a 10-year plan is a good idea. Maybe having a 5-year plan, right? But just basically calibrating yourself towards that 5-year plan and recalibrating the 5-year plan as well. Taking stock, seeing that, is this really, am I still on track? Is this going to drive me towards where I want to be in life? If it isn't, then maybe I should be looking for something else. But what I tend to do as well, and this is something that I've recently adopted in my life, is I always think very analytical about the future and too far into the future sometimes. So I stopped doing that, mainly purely because it becomes so overwhelming because the possibilities are endless. You can't see that far. So one of the things that really just worked for me in terms of pivoting or persevering or the skill of quitting is primarily saying, I don't need to know what's going to make me happy in 5 years.
Yeah.
Because I won't know. There's no possible way of knowing what's going to make me happy in 5 years. What I do know now is that I'm not happy where I am. What can I do to change my current situation? And that's all I focus on. If I'm not happy in what I'm doing now, and I feel that the effort's not going to be worth it, it's not going to bring me to a point where I'm going to be happy, then I pivot. Simple as that.
Look, the best way to look at this, and I think this is going to end off my bit for the section as well, to come into the tip section. So again, as usual, we are the Real Life Tips podcast, and we want to give you something to go home with. And this is going to be the bit from my side to kind of condense the entire message. And if you only listen to this 1 minute, this is kind of what it all encompasses. If you quit fast, you'll eventually succeed faster. If you understand what I mean.
I love that.
So the more you quit, the more likely you'll be in a good position to start succeeding, right? If you keep failing at one thing, you'll never see success because you're in that one thing that you're failing all the time. But the sooner you can get through all the failures and find those successes, and this is the other thing, and this is in so many different books, and we're still going to do an episode dedicated towards momentum, but I think we need like a day-long episode on that. Everything has to do with momentum. I just read, yes, and I think if for anyone listening now, go and find the book Extreme Ownership with Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, the two Navy SEALs. They talk about leadership, but they also talk profoundly about momentum and how they used this in their, wars in Iraq and so on. But it's all got to do with small failures that builds up to big successes, right? It's got to do with getting through the small failures as soon as possible. So quitting quickly, understanding how to measure, reasons for quitting or reasons for failure so that you can do that quickly, so that you can faster get to the ideas or the reasoning towards success as fast as possible. And with that in mind, you start building momentum, even if it's in the smallest of ways. So, for example, I just want to, and this is I just want to mention this real quick. If you are like me and you're a late night goer and a late riser in the morning, and one of the things that you start changing is just getting up earlier in the morning and you go to bed a little bit earlier at night, all right? Those small things have a compounding effect into maybe doing a little bit more studying in the morning, or doing some mindful exercises in the morning, or maybe doing some guided meditation, or maybe reading a book. And that might lead to energy that you put into your brain that then gives you another idea or sparks off another interest or put you on a road to a new business concept. And you start building momentum. The more you can get out of the bad ideas and quitting the bad ideas and focusing and being able to zero in on the good ideas, the more you start building this massive tailwind of good energy and progressiveness. And that, I think, is the ideal for everyone. And again, I'm speaking from a place of having not mastered this by any stretch of the imagination. But it is literally something that I'm trying to actively work on, is to identify everything in life that doesn't serve me, everything that's a complete fail, quitting that, stopping to waste all my time, energy, kilojoules as a fitness guy right now, quitting all that and getting on board just the stuff that's going to actually enrich or somehow put back whatever at least they were worth into my life.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So yeah, Leon, I fully agree with you. I think those are some great tips. So I think what I want to do is I want to just summarize. I want to summarize the things that really stood out to me in this episode, the things that I feel we should take home. The things that I also had to take note of now, because I want to remember these things. I want to actually live by them. And it's like you said, you know, the more you quit, the more you have the ability to realign
Yes.
towards what you want to achieve in your life. So fail and fail fast. We've scraped the surface on this in the past, but it absolutely is just so true. Don't
Yes,
be
it
afraid of
is.
quitting, and don't connect your ego to that as well. There is a way to fail or to quit, not to fail, but let's say to quit, and with your head held high, thinking that this is the best decision for me. So do it more often. That's number one. Number two, your perspective is key. If you can't find the perspective, talk to people. It's always good to talk to people because they take the emotion out of it. Number three, small calibrations. Small calibrations could set you on an entire different path. On the path that you were destined for, the path that you had planned for yourself, but you ran into a wall.
We bite off more than we can chew, right? We bite off more
course.
than we can chew. Don't think about the 5 years. That's something I wanted to mention when you spoke about 5 years. When we talk about 5-year plans, we are actually saying that to have a 5-year plan, it means that you have to have a weekly plan, a daily plan, monthly, yearly, and then a 5-year plan.
Don't
You
be
can't
that guy.
just have
Don't be me.
You can't just have no, but it's true. Again, it comes down to the momentum that I just spoke about. You have to break it up into the daily small little things that build up to that 5-year plan. If you just say in 5 years, I want to have my own jet, you're going to wait until 1 month before 5 years and realize, oh, shucks, I never got my jet.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So you have to break it up close, like smallest of things. And build that momentum into that 5-year dream. Yeah.
And that brings me into the fourth tip, is the compound effect of your resource utilization. Making sure that you are constantly aware that we all have a finite amount of resources at our disposal, and we need to restructure the way that we go ahead and apply that in our lives, or the way that we use it, and just reinvest that energy into better areas of your life. If I still had that business that I was running now, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing today wouldn't be possible purely because I wouldn't have the resources. I honestly would not have the resources. So it's so important, Leon. I think with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this episode. I really found it insightful. I hope that it's been insightful and that you could derive some value out of it. If you did, if this really resonated with you, or maybe you're thinking of someone else, go ahead, share this episode with them if you feel that this could help them. And that's all I wanted to say from myself, Mono.
I'm Leon, and remember, quitting could be a skill, it can be a virtue, it can be positive. So if nothing else, remember that from tonight, that quitting is not just a negative thing. It can actually be the best thing that you could ever do in your life. My name is Leon. Thank you so much. Episode 21 next week, we'll bring you some more amazing content. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We really hope that you have found inspiration or motivation from our content this far. If you want to get access to sneak previews to our upcoming shows on a weekly basis, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel or join our Facebook page, where we also share our blog posts and other great content from time to time. So head over to our Facebook and YouTube channels and feel free to share it with your friends so that they can also join you on the journey to success. Until next time, guys, cheers.